to jump right in. All right, so here's your workflow. Hopefully everyone has it, can see it, and here we go. So the first thing we're always going to do when we go into ServicePoint is we want to do a client search. And we do that client search because we want to make sure that we will not be duplicating when we're adding someone into the system. So we'll always do a client search. We're going to give as much information as we can on that client. If the client does not show up, then we're going to add them into ServicePoint. If they do show up, then we're going to continue adding information into their existing record. And we'll always want to start with the head of household. So that's the first step that we'll do. The second step is if someone, an individual and or a family comes into your agency or contacts you and they are part of the household, then I will show you how to go through and enter the household members. Very important step to do right after your head of household. The third step is add a release of information to this one. Add a release of information. And so here, it's the third step. It's here for a really great reason because you'll probably do a release of information for your entire household, and it just makes a lot more sense to build your household first. All right, now that we have your household into ServicePoint, we have a release of information. Now it's time to go in there and add information on every household member. And this is where I'll show you my scenario, which is basically what I have is an intake assessment, which has all the questions that will be asked, that you'll be asking to make sure you can fill out the entry, okay? Again, because this is a very different process, and you have, again, I mean, we have CARES funds from federal government, we have CARES funds from the state. We're potentially going to be having a whole nother round of CARE funds. We're not going to really talk about those just yet. We will talk about the state and the local. And in just a minute, I'm going to show you the different project names, very important project names, and the distinction in those projects, because that's going to tell the state, Oregon Housing and Community Services, where those funds are coming from. So I'll show you that in just a minute. Then when we get in here, I'll talk a little bit more about the housing move-in date, because it's going to say, ask you that, and they're already living in their location. And then I'll give you some hints about what to enter when somebody is coming in as their housing status. Right? Okay, now we're going to get into all this wording here, this narrative. And this is where we want to make absolutely sure, again, that we're putting the correct funding source for the service that you'll be offering your families. Okay, so we're going to go through a service transaction process, and most likely you're going to be paying some rent. You may be paying past rent, you may be paying future rent, you may be paying rent on a monthly basis. In each of those scenarios, you'll have a different way that information gets added into the service transaction part of rental assistance. All right, and those are all your steps. I do have the interim review here. Most of you will not be using an interim review. This would be if your agency or you continue case management, so you're actually giving a case management piece of the program. There are times when you might want to do an interim review, and we're not going to go over this. If there's a change in income or a change in their location where they're living, that would be part of an interim review. I'm not going to go through that. It will be in the other user trainings, okay? But again, most likely you will not be doing a one-time interim review. And then finally, I'll show you how to exit your family out of these programs. Again, it's going to be different for the programs than your usual rental assistance programs. And then for both projects, they're actually, for one project, to make things more complicated, any of the state funds that you will be using, you will want to flag, because we do have to do a complete 6-month follow-up once they exit the program, okay? And we'll talk about that in just a minute, but it's really important for these state funds that we go back out there and we ask them questions. How's it going? How do you feel things are going, you know, with your rent? So The state wants to know that. Different is your federal funding, and your federal funding does not require the 6 months. All right. So another little thing that is it's just a little tricky, but it will be fine as long as you follow the naming standards for both the state and the federal programs or projects, okay? I believe everyone here does have this exact naming standard. There are a few agencies that are kind of quirky and they're not the same. But notice you'll always start with your agency name. And if it's an OHCS, which is Oregon Housing and Community Services COVID-19 Relief Project, this is rapid rehousing. Those are for your community members who are currently homeless. And then housing prevention, and that's going to be probably 90 to 100% of those that you're serving, those at risk of homelessness. And then finally, your federal funds, notice the only real difference in your project is it says CARES, not OHCS. So very close in naming standards, but very different funding streams. And again, those funding streams need to be accurate because that's how the state's going to be requesting those funds and documenting those funds for those who are funding us. All right, so this is going to be our scenario. What I like about this, and actually I'll send you a blank one, is it's a 2-page intake form, and if you answer the questions on these pages, you'll have everything you need to enter into ServicePoint. So for our scenario, we're going to have Barry and Dee Dee coming in requesting some assistance. They don't want to lose their housing. So I'm going to get this demographic information. There'll be a question on how has this impacted them or how they've been impacted by COVID-19. And then just some really general questions like, do they have a disability? Do they have any non-cash benefits? What is their income type if they have any income? And then what type of insurance? Okay, so basic information, critical information, especially when it comes to disability and income type. And as I scroll down, we'll determine their area median income. And I'm gonna, when we get there, I'll talk about some challenges with that. Don't worry about that right now. And then here are some questions. Where were they prior to entry into the project? How long? Where do you reside? What's your address? Are you a survivor of domestic violence? When did you enter the program? Which is going to be the date they came in and did an intake. And then finally, when you receive that template, again, I have listed very clearly for you, it's a state program or it is a federal program. All right, so going back to our basic workflow, client search, add new household, release of information. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go ahead and log into the test site because I certainly don't want to go into the live site until I'm ready to put the live data in. And we're coming in, and Angelica, you know, she gets a call and we find out that we have 2 individuals, a family, and going back to my scenario, there's Barry Lark. I wonder if I fling this in. I'm hoping if I flung that in, can everybody see real quick? So Barry and Dee Dee come in. He's the head of household. She's the spouse. We have all their basic information. Great. Let's start. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Client Point. So we're going to put all of our information about the client. All right. Bring that back up. Okay. So I said earlier that when we do our client search, we want to put as much information here as possible so that we do not duplicate, especially because people have the same names. And so the Social Security is going to be the factor that says it's not the same person. Okay. So in this case, this is Barry, and A is fine, Lark. Name data quality, extremely important for data going back to HUD. Barry A. Lark is, in this case, full name reported, all right? If for some reason the client doesn't know their name, you can say client doesn't know or client refuses. Perfectly acceptable answers are partial name. All right. We do collect this data. So the not so great, or the wrong, I hate saying wrong, answer is data not collected. We do collect this data, but there's a reason, again, one of these reasons that we may not have the data. Data not collected is a red flag and it gets kicked back from HUD. So in this case, we have a full name reported, no alias, Social Security is 464-875564. Again, in this case, it's a full Social Security reported, and he says he's not a veteran. Back into my service point. Hey, we'll do it again. So we're going to say Barry A. I need to slow down, folks. Barry A. Lark, full name reported, no alias, 464-875564, full Social Security, not a vet. Now when I search, he's not there. All right, he was there from another training, but he's not here now. So I feel confident I'm going to add my new client. Yes, I do want to do it. Press my OK. All right. So at Angelica's location, this is what her summary page is going to look like. Okay. So we've just opened a record for Barry, but we really know nothing about Barry. We don't know a project. We don't know his demographics. There's nothing about Barry. It's just his record. All right. So going back here, we did a client search. We added Barry because he is the head of household. Easy, easy. Now I want to add members into my household. All right, so how are we going to do that? All right, going back to ServicePoint, I don't want to start over when I go to Client Point and do that search. I actually want to do and build my households under Barry as the head of household. Okay. So here, if you notice, there are tabs. So you have summary, I'm skipping profiles, summary, households, release of information, entry exit, service transactions. Remember, those are the steps. Those are the steps we're going to follow. So you can actually access these pieces of ServicePoint from here, or some of you on your summary page, you can access it from your summary page. So when I build a household here, I can actually start a new household here. Both of these are completely okay. All right, in my case, I want to start a household for Barry. So I'm going to start, it's going to come up, and the first question is, what kind of household type? Well, this is a two-parent, it's a couple with no children. Okay, now we're going back. This probably looks very familiar because you're going to do the same client search, and this time it's going to be on his spouse. Dee B, Lark, data quality, that is a full name reported, Social Security, 435-85-7925, full name, she's not a veteran. I'm going to do my search, boom, client results, nothing, nothing, nothing. Barry's there, all right, so I'm going to continue. Not here. Add new client. Okay, we're going to add our new client. And when we add this record for Dee Dee, notice when I select her and continue, I am now building my household. Okay, two members of the household, one is Barry and one is Dee Dee. Excellent. Well, Barry is the head of household. We know that because we talked to him. And for your notes, the time they joined the household, the date they joined the household is when they came into your program. So if they came in today, the joined household will be 8/17. If they came 3 days ago, it's going to be 08/14/2020. And even if you put your data in today, it'll automatically say the 17th, but please go back and put the actual date. So they joined the household on the day of entry into your project. All right. So if Barry's the head of household, then Dee Dee is not the head of household. She is I don't say significant other, wife. All right, way down there at the bottom. All right, they both came in together, so they both have the same joined household information. Okay, that is all you need to do. If you, for this scenario, if you need to add a child, an aunt, a grandmother, here you go. You just say add household, do your search. If they're not there, then you're going to go ahead and say add the record. It'll come up to this screen, and you'll do the same thing. They're not the head of household, but who are they? Who are they? All right? Beautiful. All right, that's all you need to do with head of household. So now I'm just going to save and exit. And notice it took me back to the summary page, and now I see I did create my household. All right, household's there. Great. The next step, if you recall, is a release of information. And there we go. So now I'm going to do it from the top just to show a difference. Do my ROI, comes up here and it says, all right, add a release of information. All right, since there's a family, I want to make sure that the release of information is for the entire family. So I can do that by just checking top box, and everyone in that family, it could be 22 people, they're all going to be checked. Okay. Provider release of information. You always want your agency as your provider, one of your providers, okay? Allowing information to be released with your own agency, but we also want to put a release of information for the project, whether it's the state project or the federal project. So I'm going to find one of those projects, okay? And to make my life easier and show you a little shortcut, CCA is the abbreviation for their agency. So I'm going to just come up here and we're going to use federal funds. And I know federal funds has the word CARE in it. So notice when I said CARE and search, those are my two projects. Make it a little bit easier for you. Okay. Of course, if you said OHCS, you probably would have OHCS come up, or you would. All right, so in this case, they're coming in because they're losing their housing. So we're going to select HP for homeless prevention, okay? RRH is for rapid rehousing. That's if someone is currently homeless. In our case, we want to help them with their rent. So I'm going to click my little plus button. Both of my pieces, my agency and my project, exit. There they are. The release was granted, yes. Your release was granted is the date they came into your project, which we're saying is today. I'm going to click this little calendar here with this little plus, because if I do that, it automatically puts today's date. And in our continuum of care, and those of you who haven't had the basic training will go through that, in our continuum of care, we've agreed to do an ROI to 27, a 7-year ROI. Okay. And some of you might be just talking over the phone and not giving a signed statement. So it might be a verbal consent. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say me, so I have it on record. And I'm going to save my release of information. Okay. Now, a question has come up about what if someone says I do not want to sign a release of information. And you know, one thing that I just want to emphasize is that you know, HUD needs really basic demographic information. They're funding this. They really, you know, just need to know who they're funding. Details, names, Social Security, things that can be identifiable, that is not shared to HUD. It's the accumulation of reports, it's funding spent, how many people have been in the program, how they've been impacted. So one thing as a case manager is that when you talk with someone, you know, you can ease the conversation by saying, I have an ROI, and the only one who can see any of this data, and you know this because you have it for your agency and it's locked down to that project, okay? So if I don't have access to your agency and I don't have access to your project, then I cannot see this data. It's very walled in, okay? So keep that in mind as we go through. If someone really doesn't want to sign it, I did do some research from HUD about the requirements of entering data into HMIS and where that line is of where it's allowable to do and where it's not allowable, okay? So if it comes up, let's talk about it. Because HUD says, yes, you can share basic demographic data. And you don't need an ROI to do that. Okay, so set that aside. It's a kind of a deeper conversation and let me know. Okay, there are ways that you can lock down parts of data all the way down to individual pieces of data. That's a whole different training that we can get into, you know, once you get your hands into this. But really, you know, again, share the reasons. It's not the specifics, but we want to show Congress, we want to show our state leaders, we're spending their money, and this is who we're spending money to support. All right. So now, in our next step, we're going to jump here real quick. We now are going to add them actually into our project. So at this point, they're still not in the project. We haven't enrolled them into anything. In fact, we don't even know who they are. We don't know if they're male, female. We don't know their ethnicity. We don't know anything about them, okay? They're just a record in ServicePoint. So now we're going to add that information. All right. And lo and behold, there's my summary, my household, my ROI, and there's my entry exit. And just to show you the other way, I'm going to go back over to summary. And there. Okay, so here's an example where Angelica works. Her front screen does not have her ROIs. Okay, I can guarantee some of you, when you go in here and look at your summary screen, there will be your ROI. Right? That's a specific agency choice. Right? If it was here, you would see the ROI just like you saw the household. Great. So summary, we did our household, we added our ROI for our agency and just the project. And now we're going to enter them with our entry exit. And this is where I need to go to my intake assessment that I showed you just a minute ago. Okay. All right. So I'm going to add an entry for the family. All right. I'm not actually adding them to a provider called Clatsop Community Action. That's the agency. I'm adding them to the project, the federal project, CARES project for homeless prevention. Very, very important. Had an individual earlier who was trying to enroll them into her agency and did not have all the questions, and she's like, there's something wrong. And it simply was she wasn't picking the actual project, okay? The assessments are based on the project. Great. So your type. You will always pick HUD. Don't even look at these. It's always going to be HUD. And there's your project start date, today's date. Again, they came in 4 days ago or 3 days ago, use that date instead. Okay, and now I'm going to save and continue. And I will start telling ServicePoint who are these two individuals, who's Barry and who's Dee Dee. Okay, so here at the top, I'm verifying, okay, it's the CARES and it's a HUD, I know that. Oh, here's my household, everything looks good, there's Barry, there's Dee Dee, all that information, so I'm in good shape. And as I roll down a little bit, notice I'm starting to see an assessment to tell me about Barry. And so if I bring back my assessment and I scroll down, I'm going to see here's birth date, his race, I'm going to find out about if he has disabilities, all this information. So I'm going to be using that to start answering my questions here. Okay, so for COVID, the first question that will always be asked is, how has this household been impacted? And we're going to say, in Barry's instance, his employer is closing. That's how he's impacted. Great. That right there is the first of your eligibility into the project. All right, head of household, we know it's the self. Date of birth, it's 07/15/1975. Oh, here's that question. All right, well, this is a full date of birth reported. Great. Doesn't know, client refused. We do collect it, so please don't answer that. So it's going to be one of these. And we're going to say full. All right, he says his race is African American. There's no race additional. He's non-Hispanic, male. Okay, perfect. All right, going back to my sheet, it looks like that Barry has a physical disability. So does he have a disability? Yes. All right. And I'm going to go over here with that exclamation point. I want to get rid of that exclamation point. And to do that, I'm going to hit my HUD verification. And notice the different disability types that are recognized by HUD. And notice they're all showing incomplete. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit no. I'm going to move them all to no. And then I'm going to say, yes, physical disability. It's going to come up with today's date, which is perfectly fine, because that's when they're coming into the project. These two questions, that one's retired, you don't need to worry about answering. You don't need to worry about answering this question about impairments to live, ability to live independently. It automatically says yes for determination, disability determination, and there is no end date. There is no end date, so I'm just going to say yes. All right, there's my yes. Save and exit. All right, words of wisdom. If you say yes to this question, you must have a yes in your answer. All right, so I'm going to double check. I'm going to hit this magnifying glass, open up disabilities. Here's all my disabilities, and yes. So I know my answer and the answer to the question and the data are both accurate. If I say no, and one of these is yes, HUD is going to say, absolutely not. This is not okay. All right. If I say yes to disability and they're all no, HUD's going to say, absolutely not. This is not accurate data. All right. So if there's a yes, check for that yes. All right. Looking at my assessment, my next question is, is he covered by insurance? And yeah, he says he's got state insurance. So I'm going to do my yes. There's my exclamation point. Going to hit my HUD verification. All incomplete. I'm going to say no, move them all over. And he says, yes, I have state insurance. Do my yes, save and exit. That easy. All right. Answered yes, and there's a yes. Following along, percent of AMI. This is where it gets a little tricky because these answers don't necessarily fit in the program. It's not an easy fix. My understanding is for the federal funds, it has to be less than 80%. So this is kind of a funky little thing here. So, you know, in this case, I'm going to say greater than 50%, but I know in my documentation it's less than 80, and so they're qualified. Okay. And notice my next question is, well, does he have any income? And he says, yes, I do. So there's my HUD verification. I'm going to say no, move them all over. He says he has unemployment insurance. So here we go. There it is. I'm going to say yes. Boo, there it goes. Today's date, unemployment insurance. He is receiving income. Well, how much is he saying his unemployment insurance is? He says it's $450, and we don't have an end date. So I'm going to save it. All right? So yes, he has income. It's called unemployment, save and exit. Yes, and there's a yes. All right, non-cash benefits, what does he say? Oh, he does. So we're going to come here, yes, quickly, HUD verification, move them all to no. He has snap, so he's going to say yes, and save and exit. Yeses and yeses. All right, prior living situation. All right, so I'm going to look over here at my nice chart. Now, Barry and Dee Dee are coming in and they have housing, right? So prior living situation is basically, if I look at my drop down, is going to be, and I scroll down, right now, they are renting clients with no ongoing subsidy, right? They're paying for their rent. So they're coming in with no, that's not even right, with no ongoing subsidy, all right? Length of stay and previous place. All right, so my notes say use basically around the entry to project date. So they've been in their place. Honestly, you can put how long they've been. So in this case, he's been a year or longer. So they've had a lease for a year or longer. That's fine. All right, client location. No, just write this down as your note. You're always going to say our COC OR 505 balance estate, always and forever. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to say Clatsop as my county, and this is where my ignorance is going to be. Is there a Clatsop town? I'm going to say yes, I don't know, but put your city with your county. And then what's their last address? We know they have an address, right? So in this case, he told us it was 111 High Drive. We're going to say state. Oh, gosh, if I do a zip code, it'll fill it all in for me. Little trick, if you know the zip code, put it right here and it'll fill in all that information. Bummer. Bummer. I don't know the zip code. He gave us his phone number. In this case, right now, it's XXXX. Address data quality. We're going to pretend like I have that zip code, so full address reported. And you know what? You can do a housing. No. Landlord, I don't think that we are required to put any of that landlord information. Okay? Let's just get their address in here and be done. Accidentally put 2 in there. All right. And then finally I said, you know, there's a question about domestic violence or survivor, and it's a no. And here's that move-in date. All right, this is one of those that we just say the move-in date is always the date they entered the project. All right, so I know a little calendar there, enter the project, and I know, I mean, they were there a year ago, but we want to have today's date. All right, so I'm going to save Barry's record. That's his record. But Dee Dee, scroll up to the household. We need to go in there and also do the same thing for Dee Dee. Okay? Before I add Dee Dee, I know there's some information here that's going to be the same for Dee Dee. I entered information for Barry, and I can tell you right now, it's the same. I don't want to repeat that. So I can come over here with Barry. I can say add household data. That household data is for the whole family, and all that information, balance estate, blah, 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 address. Don't worry about your lead agency. I mean, you do know what it is if you're coming for one. And I'm just going to save and exit. Okay? And my hope now is when I go to Dee Dee by selecting over here, that basic information, when we get down there, shows up. There you go. Don't have to redo it. Okay? So we're going to say that she, because of school closing, she has to stay home. Right? And I'm going to go through this really fast, but I think you understand. I don't want to keep to the 1880. She is a full race, non-Hispanic, female, disabling condition. She says, oh, she does, so yes. Exclamation point, HUD verification, all incomplete, so I'm going to say no. And she says developmental, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to put the start date of the project, not worry about these two questions. It has been determined, and there's no end date. So that's an easy one. Save and exit. I had a yes there, so I know I have a yes there. All right, what about insurance? Check it out. Oh, she also has state insurance, so yes. HUD verification. Incompletes to no. State insurance, yes. Save and exit. Beautiful. There's a yes. I know there's a yes. Here's that AMI question. Not going to worry about it because there's some confusion. Remember, 80% or less for CARES. Income from any source. Yep, she has unemployment, same thing. Well, let's do a no. Let's say she does not have any income, and I say no. Because I personally want consistency and I don't want to risk having anything come back from HUD, I want to get rid of that exclamation point, so I'm still going to do a HUD verification. And they're all incomplete, but I'm going to say no and leave it at that. Consistency. If I have a no, I've answered my no's, okay? And cash benefits, she says no, same thing. Want to get rid of that, all no's, save and exit, scroll down, up, all that passed along. That's wonderful. This came up recently, why the address did not follow. My thinking is the address is on the head of household. You do not need to repeat it. Okay, you do not need to do that. Save you some time. No, and it carried over and it said today's date, coming into the project, 8/17/2020. When I save and exit, entering the data for Barry and for Dee Dee, I've just officially entered them into the CARES project, homeless prevention for federal funds. All right, so this is where it's going to start getting a little trickier when we get into that service transaction. Okay, I want to bring this back up because I want to show you, we're going to go through the steps that I have on number 5. And when you look at this, everything that I'm going to talk about will show you specifically how to do it. All right. So again, a nice resource with what we're about to go through. All right. So client information in the project, service transaction. And I'm going to add a service. And I want the whole family in that service. Again, it's not the agency who's providing, it's the project. So to make my life easier, I'm going to say CARES. There's my project, homeless prevention. Very important because whatever your project is, it's going to change some of these outcomes, change some of these questions. All right, here's where things will start to be unique depending upon how your agency is paying to help this family. Okay, if you're paying arrears, and in this case we're going to say the arrears, I have it coming up, for the last 3 months. So, and we can do that. We're going to go back and we're going to pay the last 3 months up through July of their rental assistance. Okay. For us to know, for the state to know that it's back arrears rent, keep your start date and your end date the entry date. Okay, so we know if we see a start and end date, what we're about to do is pay arrears. Okay, service type, I'm going to look down here and there's my rent payment assistance. Probably always going to be rent payment assistance. We're going to go to last 3 months. Okay, sorry, I was reading something real quick. All right, so I now said rent payment. I'm going to save and continue. The next piece, I'm going to roll back up. The next piece that's vitally important is which fund is paying for it. Which fund? So I'm going to come down here, and you'll see in the instructions, it's going to say, look for that little triangle, apply funds for service, and I'm going to open it up. Okay. First section is about vouchers. That's in case you're using voucher system with your accounting. Most places are not. So apply funds, and I'm going to come down here to the funding source. I'm going to say add funding source. And this is telling me, yes, I want that funding source, and I'm going to pay 3 months of their past rent. So if their rent was $500, I'm going to pay $5,000. I mean, yeah, that's a lot. $15,000. It's going to come out of the CARES Act. All right. The good news is that when you do the funding source, probably the only fund it can come out of will show up, which is a great thing. So again, if you use your project up here and it's accurate, then your funding will show up as accurate. All right, $1,500. Conditional, supporting documents, follow-up, you do not need. That's for a regular rental assistance program. Okay, if you scroll down and you see a needs information, the status, and this need is closed because you're going to pay that back 3 months rent. And then I can save and exit. All right, there we go. So when I look at this, I can tell you from those dates, $1,500, I know I'm doing a back payment. So that's the first thing. Second, all right, well, we're going to pay the next 2 months, August and September. So August and September, but we're going to pay them separately. We're going to pay the August one, and we're going to pay the second one for September. 2 different services, okay? So I'm going to add a service, whole family, not my provider. I'm going to find my cares, same thing. But in this case, I'm going to pay this month's rent, right? Very clear. That's this month's rent, rent payment, save and continue. Roll up a little bit. There's that information. Apply funds for service. Forget the voucher because you want this add funding source. There's the funding source coming over. I'm going to follow my little path, and I'm paying $500 for August. Scrolling down, identified, it's closed, save and exit. Boom. All right, past August. Add a service real quick for September. Just kind of show you HP 09, 01, 09, 30, 2020, same process. And you're probably doing this all at once. One sitting. You're doing 3 different payments while you're sitting there. But it's recorded in ServicePoint differently. So just kind of follow over. I'm going to pay my next $500, come down, identified, closed, save and exit. All right. So going back to an organization, if your organization says we're only going to pay month to month, I'm only going to do a 500 check for each month, it's an accounting choice, that's how you'll do it. 1 check for past, 1 check each for the months. Okay. Now you're an agency. I'm going to delete that because your agency also has the opportunity to prepay the next 3 months. Okay, so I don't want to do it month by month. So how do I prepay the next 3 months? All right, it's going to be very similar, except our dates are going to change. So I'm going to add my service, pick my family, find my project, HP, scroll down. All right, dates. I'm going to pay August, so August the 1st. And what is the last date for this payment? So August, September, October, August, September, October. So my end date is the 31st. All right, that's telling the state you're paying 3 months of rent. So fairly the same process, it's the dates that are going to make that difference, that distinction. Apply for funds, add funding source, there it is. And lo and behold, I'll come over here and pay $1,500, just like before. Scrolling down, my need, closed, save and exit. Beautiful. Last 3 months, next 3 months. And I believe the program can do 6 months, so that's pretty much the whole thing. All right, so very important. Most of you, you probably will do arrears. If you don't do arrears, you won't do the same date. You won't do the 1717. I just showed you how to do it month by month. I know one agency wants a voucher each month. Perfectly fine. And a lot of agencies are saying, no, we're going to do one lump sum. We're going to get this in, help this family, and send them, off to take care of themselves. All right, back to dashboard. No more services. Go to my client information. Check out my summary real quick. Yeah, so at this agency in Clatsop, notice the services do show up. Okay. All right, again, probably in your same sitting. All this is happening at one time, most likely. Very different than other rental assistance programs. So now, before you're finished, we're going to turn around and exit them from ServicePoint. Exit them from the project. So going back to entry exit, there's my project. They came in today, so I'm going to exit. Click my little exit, click my family. You know what? They're actually exiting on the last day of my assistance, 10/31/2020. And the reason they're exiting is because they completed the program. The destination is exactly back where they came from. Rental with no ongoing subsidy. That's a true statement. They came in, no subsidy. We helped them. They're exiting with no subsidy. I'm going to save and continue. It'll always bring back that original assessment in the event anything has changed. And because you're meeting with them and doing this all at once, unless they get a phone call and say they now have non-cash benefits, you're not going to change this. So that's pretty easy. Save and exit. You did it. Okay. Barry, Dee Dee came today. You as a case manager, intake worker, whatever your position is, you're going to gather their information on that sheet or something similar. You're going to build that household. You're going to get that ROI in there. You're going to open them up in the correct project. You're going to go directly to service transactions. Depending on how you're paying, you're going to do arrears using the same date. You're going to do it month by month if you're going to be paying month by month. And then you will do one big chunk using the start date to the end date of what you're paying. Your needs have been closed. You save and exit. You go directly to your entry exit. You exit them out of the project. They were completed it and they went right back to rental with no ongoing subsidy. You are essentially done with the federal funding source that we just used. Okay, this one's done. If this was state, I'm going to read just, if this was OHCS, if that's what your manager said, pull it out of state. When you get to this exit, flag, put on your calendar. There are reports we can run that say 6 months from 10/31, I need to call Barry or Dee Dee and find out how they're doing, do a follow-up. All right. So you have to come back in 6 months and do that follow-up. Again, if this was OHCS, which is the state fund, federal funds were completely done. Completely done.